Hi, okay, back again, part three. It's the final part of this week's online lecture, and we've been looking at what is news. Got to be new, factual, true, significant, interesting, and try your best to be impartial. So, we're going to have a look at how that's reflected in today's news. Now, today's news is different to me than it is to you, as I've recorded these lectures uh, in the early part of this week on Monday, so things will have moved on a bit, but it's still good to have a look at these newspapers and see whether they match the characteristics that we've just listed. So you can evaluate that yourself, whether these newspapers and their news choices have stayed true to what we've talked about. Also, if you want to look at more up-to-date front pages to marry the characteristics of those, then basically just type in BBC papers and then have a look at the links. And the BBC publishes the front pages every day, normally about 8 o'clock in the morning, but they're all available online as an archive as well. So just put in BBC papers in your search engine, and those shall come up. So let's just start with today's papers. We'll start with the Guardian, and on the day that I'm looking at these newspapers, the petrol crisis is in full flow, or not full flow, so to say. So most of the papers have gone with this story because at the weekend everyone was dashing around trying to get their petrol. But in light of that, the Guardian has come up with a new angle on that. So it's new news. Remember I was talking earlier about if you do cover an ongoing story or revisit a story from a few days, weeks, or months ago, it's key that you come up with a new story to deliver the new angle, to deliver the greatest impact. So they've gone on the angle of the army are being considered to be drafted in to start delivering fuel and driving vehicles. Also, late last night, that's the Sunday night, it emerged that Angela Merkel's party has been narrowly beaten by her rivals, the SPD. So they've picked up on that. A bit of a sea change. Germany's Europe's biggest economy, so it does impact on us as well. And they're also referencing the Labour conference, which is going on. State ownership funds new Labour energy row. So the pictures, it's quite an interesting front page. That it's factual news, new news or new angle on a news story. Uh, it's interesting. There's plenty for people to get the teeth into there. Okay. Daily Telegraph. Again, they've gone with the angle of the army. So they've moved the story on, not merely about people queuing for half an hour or an hour outside the petrol station, or pictures of petrol station closed or things like that. They've moved the story on. They've also got it's got a striking image of Angela Rayner, who called Tories scum, and in particular Boris Johnson, I believe, and that's caused a bit of a storm. And they've used a picture of her looking quite defiant there. So uh, again, it's factual, it's interesting, it's bright, and it's new angle there on that story. Uh, Pretty similar goings on the Times, actually. Again, gone with the army story. The picture of Angela Rayner, again a bit more tightly cropped, uh, bright image. They've gone with Germany as well. Uh, so there's quite a lot of similarities, really. And when you're making these decisions, sometimes late at night when you're running a newspaper, you might not decide what your lead story is going to be till quite late at night, 10 o'clock even. So the pressure's on to get it right. You're always thinking, what do people need to know? What are they going to be talking about the following day? And all these stories, of course, will have been online on the website first. The Eye, again, they've gone with a pretty big story on the army and fuel crisis, and they have used a picture actually of cars queuing up outside a petrol station, and I suppose they were struggling to get a picture of any army people driving tankers because it's not happened yet, so that's why they've gone there. Again, a reference to the German elections. So you're seeing quite a lot of similarities between these front pages, and that does tend to happen when you get, big stories which are so big that you've got to, you've got to reflect that. But as I keep saying, you're always looking for a fresh angle. You're always looking for a better angle than your rivals, and if you can get that, that's great. And probably any paper which had just gone for we're running out of fuel would have looked a bit out of date really on Monday morning. So it's all about what will happen next, what's going to occur. Metro, slightly different angle. You're just so foolish. Bit of a pun headline. Remember what we've talked about, difference between newspaper and online headlines. You wouldn't use that as an online headline. There's no SEO value in that, so there is a difference. So start thinking about the differences between newspaper headlines and online headlines. And they've gone their sort of fresh angle, if you like, that's not been reflected elsewhere, is Grant Shapps blaming the truckers for causing the petrol crisis, and also drivers over the panic at the pumps. They've gone with Angela Rayner there as well. It's a popular picture. Whichever freelance photographer's taken that has had a good little payday this morning. The Daily Star, as we know, takes a slightly different take on it, a bit more light-hearted. It's aimed at people who aren't really that much into hard news or the real, nitty-gritty of the issues of the day. They appear to people who appeal to their readership of people who are just fed up because they can't fill the car with petrol and just waiting in line. No matter what you think about the Daily Star, it's very successful at what it does. It's targeted. It's identified the audience it wants to appeal to, and it plays to that solely. There's a couple of people I worked with a few years ago who were absolutely brilliant journalists who work on the Daily Star, and it is quite difficult, to keep the theme really. I know they have long hard meetings about their choice of front page, and they do write good headlines. Petrol chumps, so it's a play on petrol pumps, obviously. Greedy fuel bosses raise prices amid forecourt panics. That's a slightly different angle than the others have chosen, and they've chosen to go on the fact that they're saying that some petrol station owners are profiteering out of this by pushing prices up. And I did notice that my local petrol station has ramped up prices by about 5 or 6 pence a litre as well, so that appeals to a certain demographic. There we go. Daily Mirror, petrol pump chaos, shambles. So their new take on it is really they're being critical of the government really. PM was warned in June about the driver shortfall and did nothing. Daily Express, don't blame driver crisis on Brexit. So again, they're picking up on some comments made about the shortages of HGV drivers. They're saying it's nothing to do with Brexit. The Financial Times has gone on a totally separate story, which looks like a bit of an exclusive at this point, and a bit worrying for people really, about graduate salary threshold for paying back student loans being cut back, which obviously something we'll all be keeping an eye on as we go on. Daily Mail, surprisingly, they've not gone with anything about the fuel crisis, but what they have got is new news. It's an investigation that they've done where they're saying that smart motorways horrors are exposed. Undercover Mail report finds 1 in 10 vital safety cameras not working. So that's sort of a good example of what is new news really. That's something that the readers wouldn't have known about prior to reading this when it was either published online or in print, as we're looking at here. So good eye-grabbing story that really. There's a lot of these smart motorways around Greater Manchester, the M60 and parts of the M62 as well. So that's something that will interest a lot of people. So I'll just minimise that. So after we've looked at those front pages, we've seen examples of new news, the stories that we've looked at, factual, true, the significant to a community. I think each story that we highlighted really has got some significance to a community. They're interesting as well. All those front pages were interesting, even though some were, the same. If someone's going to pick one, we'll find that interesting and impartial in the main. Newspapers, are allowed to express their views a bit. So, like I say, whether it's possible to be impartial is another thing entirely. But for our purposes, we want to keep our news stories impartial. Okay, so that sets us up nicely for the week 2 workshops, where we'll be doing a bit more news writing. We'll develop some of these themes that we've discussed today a bit more. We'll look into other areas, and we'll start doing some tests as well to get you writing more news. Next week's online lecture is going to be about sourcing stories, and that'll be done by Sarah Hadwin. So, okay, if you've got any questions or queries relating to these 3 short lectures we've done in week 2, then please raise them at the workshop. And don't forget, in the meantime, make sure you read those assignment briefs. They're in Blackboard. Print off and look at your editor's code off the IPSO website. Make yourself aware of all the clauses that exist in there, and just keep on thinking, what is news? Look at the list we've made. What isn't news? Refer to your own lists, and keep reading, watching and listening news and evaluating it and looking at it with an analytical mindset. Okay, that's enough from me. Thanks very much.